Our Easter story for this morning comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 24, beginning in verse 1. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb taking the spices that they had prepared. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they went in, they did not find the body. While they were perplexed about this, suddenly two men in dazzling clothes stood beside them. The women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, but he has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still in Galilee that the Son of Man must be handed over to sinners and be crucified, and on the third day rise again." Then they remembered his words, and returning from the tomb, they told all this to the 11 and to all the rest. Now it was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women with them who told this to the apostles. But these words seemed to them an idle tale, and they did not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen cloths by themselves. Then he went home, amazed at what had happened. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Easter comes with all sorts of questions. There are always some food questions. What are we going to have for Easter dinner this year? A roast? A ham? A honey-baked ham? Woohoo, a honey-baked ham. That's my favorite. And there are candy questions. Sooner or later, we get around to these questions at our house on Easter Sunday morning, even though we don't have little children, except for one now there. But what's your favorite Easter candy, really? Jelly beans? Robin's eggs? Marshmallow Peeps? Raise your hand if it's Marshmallow Peeps. I just want to see. There's one out here. Children over in the playground, what's your favorite candy? Marshmallow Peeps? There's one in the back as well. I don't really believe anybody eats those Marshmallow Peeps. I think they're just recycled every year and they come back all the time. There are lots of pastors in my family. And always on Easter afternoon, the questions would start as we called each other and asked, "Did you have a big crowd in church today? Were the Easter lilies all open?" See how they're practically all open here this morning? Was the music wonderful? What hymns did you sing? Question after question after question. When I was a little boy, growing up over at Grace Covenant Presbyterian Church, the old church on Conway Road at that time, they'd have an Easter egg hunt during Sunday school on Sunday morning. And the big question always was, who found the golden egg? There was one special golden egg that was harder to find than all the others. And I'm not bragging, but I found the golden egg 3 years in a row. There was a little girl a few years older than me. Her name was Ellen. She was very competitive, very jealous. And she claimed, "It's not fair. His dad's the pastor. It's fixed. There's no way he could find that golden egg all the time." Year after year, she protested. You know, they changed that old church building now into a microbrewery. And I drove by there the other day, and there she was in the bar telling anybody who would listen, "It's not fair. His dad was the pastor. It must have been fixed." Easter comes with all sorts of questions. We bring with us all kinds of questions to Easter. What must it have really been like to walk up to that empty tomb on Easter Sunday morning? Did it really happen? Were there really angels there? Maybe it's just a story. How can you believe a story like this in today's world? We bring all kinds of questions with us. But there's a big question right in the middle of the Easter story, and I'm wondering if you heard it. Did you hear it when I was reading that from the Gospel of Luke? Did you hear that question? The women came to the tomb early in the morning, bringing spices, And when they got there, they found that the stone was rolled away. The tomb was empty. They couldn't find the body. Luke says that they were perplexed. I think that's an interesting way of putting it, as though the women were just kind of casually thinking, well, this is odd, isn't it? I imagine the women were really saying, what the heck? Or something like that, and their minds were racing, just trying to piece together some sort of explanation. They'd come to the tomb with spices to care for the body. They needed a body. They had watched their beloved friend die. When there's a death, there's a dead body. This is the way that life and death work. That's the way you begin to walk through shock and grief when this sort of thing has happened, and you just try and make your way forward. When someone dies, you need a body. It confirms everything that has happened, and it sets the course for what you must do to go forward. Where's the body? What the heck? What's going on? But that's not the question that we find right here in the middle of the Easter story. Did you hear the question as it was posed to the women? When the women who are perplexed about this empty tomb are standing there, suddenly two men in dazzling white robes appear to them. And then Luke says the women are no longer perplexed, now they're terrified. And the men say to them, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Easter comes with all sorts of questions, but this is the question that you're asked when you're standing before an empty tomb and you have no earthly idea of what is going on. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? I've been thinking about rewriting the Easter story. There's something about this question from the men angels that sort of bother me. I think I would sort of write it like this. I would have the angels say to the women in as gentle a voice as possible, now just hold on. Maybe you should even sit down. Take a deep breath, a deep cleansing breath. Breathe in through the nose, let it out through the mouth. We know this is going to be hard for you to comprehend. We know this is going to come as a big surprise. Just keep breathing. Jesus' body isn't in the tomb because Jesus has been raised from the dead. I think that might be a better way to put it. Maybe not. I can see a lot of you out there thinking, hey, the last thing we need is some men/angels mansplaining to us what it is that's happened here on Easter Monday. What we get instead are these two men who just sort of blurt out this question, why are you looking for the living among the dead? Now, why would you ask someone what sounds like a rhetorical question when they're so obviously befuddled and upset? Well, if it's a rhetorical question, it's supposed to add emphasis to what the questioner already knows. The angels did not want an answer from the women. They want to contrast what the women think they know to what the angels already know is the truth. He's not here. He's risen. The women know that Jesus is dead. They watched it happen. The women know that Jesus' body was put in a tomb. They watched Joseph of Arimathea place it in the tomb. And so the women come to the tomb with spices to care for the body. The women know that death is the end and there is a body that's going to be there. They know that whatever truth and goodness and beauty may have shone briefly in Jesus' life, they know now that it was crushed by the leaders and the authorities who could impose their will whenever they wanted. The women know that those who hold all the power always have the last word. The women know that the graveyard is the most basic reality in life that you can face, and that when you go there just to do what needs to be done, just to hold on to some kind of order and stability in life, you go because it's necessary, even if the necessity seems to be imposed by death itself. But when the women come, the angels blurt out this question to them. Right in the middle of the Easter story. And it's the question that seems to stop them in their tracks. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Indeed, this question is thrust right into the path of everyone, including you and me. Whenever we come to the place in life where we know that what's done is done. Any place where we think the only thing left for us is to face up to reality and deal with the way the world is. Anywhere that death and defeat have the last word. This is the question. It's thrust right into our path. When war seems inevitable and suffering intractable. When government seems broken and leaders completely self-serving. When institutions seem untrustworthy. When broken relationships have hardened into silence. When illness seems so unfair and untreatable. When sadness and loneliness seem overwhelming and unrelenting and unending. This question is thrust into our paths. Whenever we come to graveyards in our life, this Easter question is thrust into our path and throws open the door of something else that is necessary to know. God's new reality. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? This question breaks death's grip on the possibility of love and joy and renewal and redemption. It's a question that begins to just shatter it. It's a question that calls into question every way that we accept sin and human brokenness and defeat and death as the way that life has to be and can't be changed. You see, this question is always a prelude to Easter's great announcement. God raised Jesus of Nazareth from the dead. The women went to the tomb because they knew there was a death and there was a body. But when they get to the tomb on Easter morning, they are told that there is something much, much more to know and to believe and to trust. Now you can see and know that God's power and love revealed in the life of Jesus Christ is the heart of all creation and all eternity. The present and the future are not sealed in the tomb. Look, he's not here. He has been raised. Jesus of Nazareth is alive. How do you know deeply within yourselves that this Easter question is always answered in Easter's announcement? He's not here, he's risen. How do you know? I was going through some old papers in Park Lake's history, and I came across a brief memoir written by one of Dr. Farron's daughters. Dr. Farron was the founding pastor of Park Lake. In 1925, he pastored for about 10 years or so, and he was just the kind of quintessential old-school Southern Presbyterian pastor, very straight-laced, always in a morning coat at church, always had his shirt buttoned up. And she was remembering the way life was for them as they grew up across the lake here at Park Lake. After she had grown and left home, she remembers getting the telegram that said, "Papa has died." And she thought to herself, "Oh my goodness, what does this mean? How can our lives go on? Papa was the center of everything for us. Papa was the center of that church across the lake. What can this possibly mean?" And as she was wondering about that, as those questions came racing into her mind, she remembered her papa, Dr. Farron, standing in the living room of the house over there across the lake, saying to their family, "I want you to remember the words of Dwight L. Moody, the great evangelist from Chicago. Someday you will hear of Dwight L. Moody's death. You'll see it in the papers. It will say Dwight L. Moody is dead. Don't you believe a word of it. I shall be more alive then than I am now. I will have just changed my address. for I will have gone into the presence of God. How do you know? How do you know that the prelude in Easter's question always leads to Easter's pronouncement? He is not here. He is risen. Jesus Christ, Jesus of Nazareth, God is raised from the dead. The women are told, remember how he told you when you were in Galilee, that he would be handed over to sinners, crucified, and 3 days rise again. Do you remember? And as the angels speak this to them, there's something that seems to trigger their memory, and not only trigger their memory, but trigger their very experience again of Jesus' words and begin to open them up to the reality that God is indeed doing something new, something that they couldn't imagine, that indeed Jesus Christ was raised from the dead. Helen and I like to watch the PBS program Finding Your Own Roots with Henry Louis Gates. And we were watching an episode the other night, and one of the guests was Regina King, the wonderful African-American actress. And as they do on each episode with the guest and with Regina King, they had gone through all of her genealogical background, and most of it focused on her recent family, 1 or 2 generations back, trying to help her understand who was married to who and who was married to this person. But then as it went along, Henry Louis Gates said to her, we found some other remarkable information. We've been able to trace records back all the way to your great-great-great-grandfather in Elmore County, Alabama. We've actually been able to find the slave manifold that shows the plantation where he was enslaved and his name there. And they began to show that to her. And you could see that she was beginning to become overwhelmed with emotion. And then Henry Louis Gates said, not only that, look, we found this marriage certificate. How unusual was it for enslaved people to be able to be married? But look, we found this marriage certificate. Your great-great-great-great-grandfather got married as soon as he could after the Civil War was over and made his own home there in Elmore County. It was just remarkable. But then he told her, Regina, that's not all. Look at this record. Look at this voter registration roll. 2 years after the Civil War, in an act of Reconstruction, your great-great-great-grandfather, who had just been liberated from slavery, walked into the courthouse in Elmore County and registered the vote. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? And you could see how overwhelmed she was. And she just began to say to herself, now I know, now I know, now I know. And then she went on and said something I thought was so profound. Dr. Gates asked her, Regina, what are you feeling? And she said, it just deepens my sense of knowledge and my sense of connection to this whole experience. Because now I know it's directly related to me. Friends, this is the good news of Easter. It is directly related to you. Friends, this is the Easter pronouncement that follows the question that you're asked, why are you looking for the living among the dead? He is not here. He has been raised, and it is directly related to you. And in this news, there is a truth told about you, who you are, and who God is. God is now saying to you, see in this risen Christ, this is the image I created for you when I created you in the image of God. See in the risen Christ, this is the life. This is the life I want for you when he came to dwell among you. It is directly related to you. Anywhere you find yourself facing the question, why are you looking for the living amongst the dead? Anywhere you find yourself struggling with the sense that death is encroaching in a way that closes off everything else, the announcement follows. He's not here, he's risen. God has raised Jesus Christ from the dead, and it's you. It's directly related to you. It was my turn to lead chapel this past week for the 4-year-olds from the child care center over here on the chancel. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. She said, well, why don't you try telling them the Easter story? Okay, well, how will I do that? And she said, well, here, take this plastic carton full with plastic eggs, each with a different color, and each of the plastic eggs was a little symbol of the Easter story. So I brought that in here with me, and all the 4-year-olds lined up, and I thought I'd begin by testing them what they had learned with Helen last week. Do you remember what you learned? Silence. And I said, remember the story of Palm Sunday? And it began to come back to them. Oh, yeah, Jesus rode in the town on the donkey. Oh, yeah. And then I told them about how his friends sort of ran away from him, and his people got mad, and so mad that they killed him, and they leaned into the story. And I said, do you remember what happens next? And one child said, oh yes, that's when the Easter bunny came, right after that. And I thought, we have work to do here. So I had this little carton of plastic colored eggs, and I opened it up and slowly passed out an egg to each of the children, and we started to walk through it. They walked forward, opened their egg, and took out a little symbol. And then we explained, or I explained the symbol to each. These are nails. And the next egg, and these are pieces of silver, and this is a crown of thorn, and this is the linen cloth that they wrapped his body in. Until finally, the child with the last egg brought it forward and opened it up, and it was empty. And I said, see, that reminds us of the empty tomb. It was a marvelous way to go through the Easter story, and they seemed to start to know and to lean into it and to understand. And then one little girl, a sweet little girl, I said, are there any last questions? Millie raised her hand and she said, Pastor Dan, how come you know so much about Easter? And the question caught me off guard. I don't think she was being sarcastic like, okay, Mr. Big Shot, what made you think you knew all this stuff? She was so sincere, so sweet that it caught me off guard. And to be truthful, how do you answer that kind of question? Pastor Dan, how do you know so much about Easter? How do you know so much about Easter? What does it have to do with you? And the words just started to come out of my mouth as I looked at them. Well, when I was little, about your age, my mommy and daddy, they told me this story. They told me the Easter story too. And when I was little, about your age, my mommy and daddy, they took me to church, just like you've come into chapel today. And there were people there at the church, wonderful people, and they told me this story too. And then they helped me to read the Bible, and they read these stories, just like we've read the story from the Bible here today. How do you know? How do you know? And suddenly I realized that I wasn't so much answering her question. I was answering my own. Somewhere, the risen Christ has been at work in the life of someone. Somewhere. It's directly related to you. And it's how you know. Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He's risen. Amen.